So Chris, what are the main developments regarding the Retail Distribution Review, or RDR, in the UK?
As we all know, the Retail Distribution Review was introduced in January this year, and what basically that was to do, well, what it was there to do was really to do three things. Initially, it was to raise the professional standards of the industry in the UK. It was also to look at transparency and get disclosure out into the UK, and also it was to give the control back really to the client away from product providers when it came to fee charging, or basically advisor charging as it's called. So that was what it was intended to do, and certainly with the last 10 months or so we've seen not a lot of change actually in the marketplace, and the reason for that is what we think the RDR has actually done is give the market a nudge into it being regulated properly by the regulators. So what again you've got there is effectively people have gone through the qualification, professionalism. They've had to go to what we call QC level 4, which is diploma level, and then the next level on that is chartership, which I think will the nudge will be there to get them all chartered by maybe 2018 onwards.
And what's been the response from various institutions?
What we haven't seen a lot of, which is a bit of a surprise, is a lot of the businesses being developed into what we call professional service firms. So if you think about accountants, solicitors, that type of thing, and law firms, where they are actually charging clients directly. That hasn't really happened as yet in the UK, because a lot of the charging is still done through the product. Some firms are moving towards explicit fee charging, which is good, because that obviously means a conversation has to be had about what this means on the charging structure, and the clients are going to pay if they value the services going forward.
And are there any unintended consequences of this?
That really is about things like, is there an advice gap in the marketplace, where Deloitte, for example, have brought research in to say that potentially 5.5 million people in the UK fall into this advice gap, where they either can't afford advice, or they don't want to pay explicitly for financial advice because they don't value it. So there's a lot of challenges there that are going on. There's more challenges to come. We've got potentially RDR 2 coming through, Retail Distribution 2, which is looking at share classes, move to clean or super clean share classes, where basically rebating is technically a no-go area, unit rebating, as well as the cash rebating angle. Cash rebating is has actually been banned, but unit rebating may actually be banned as well.
What will be the real test for RDR?
What we've effectively got is a move from transactional-based services through to what we call relational-based services. Some people like to call it holistic and that type of stuff. We're a bit more practical than that. It's more relational-based. But what does that mean? Well, that now means really the days of sitting down with a client and just talking products are gone. What it means is really a look at what clients need, what their objectives are, what their wants are, and what their goals are. So again, it's looking at putting the client at the centre of the process and looking at their aspirations. And where I saw this work perfectly well was 10 years ago in Australia, where they built cash flow modelling around client needs, wants, goals, aspirations. And the way that worked is effectively they would look at having a lifestyle assessment of the client first and foremost, not mentioning product, not mentioning anything else. And then what they would bring in on the back of that is cash flow to take a look at what trade-offs a client would need in the planning process or advice process, whichever way you look at it. And that would then effectively then drive down towards, right, well, if you're going to want education planning or property planning or retirement planning at these stages, Mr. and Mrs. Client, these are the trade-offs you're going to have to start to make. So the advantage of that, from a behavioural economics stance, because the regulators in the UK are using behavioural science as a regulation tool, which I think is a great thing, because it's all about decision making and how people make decisions. So from that stance, it gets clients to buy into the process completely, because what effectively the planners are now doing and the advisors are now doing is co-building a financial strategy, bringing in integrated services into that before products even mentioned. So that's where we look at, we have a trademark name called New Relationship Economy, and that's what this means. It's really looking at, how can you put the client at the centre of it? How can you ensure that they have the buy-in? how can you ensure that their experience is heightened to the extent that they really value what the planners are doing. Because if they're not going to do that, they're not going to pay explicit fees to the advisor firm or planner firm. So the kind of overview of that is, it's an integrated financial plan that is put together, and that covers anything and everything. So that it's almost like the financial planner these days is more of a mentor or a coach than the old days of being an advisor. So it's less transactional, far more relational. And what we want is the clients at the end of the day to really value it, own it, and want it, because then they'll come back for more reviews, they'll understand what's being done for them, they'll understand that everything that's being done is being showcased. So as I mentioned before, what we're looking at is how these planners and advisors showcase their alpha and what they're doing for clients, and clients really get a grip of, this person is really worth the salt, or worth the money I'm paying for them, because they're doing all this, all that goes behind the scenes. So we have a presentation about that, which looks at a duck on the water, calm lake, but what's going underneath is their legs are going like that, and that's really what we're saying. The financial planners and advisors need to demonstrate now. What exactly you're doing for the client? What's the back office doing? The front office doing? Do you operate para planners? Think about the medical profession or the law profession, paralegals, paramedics. Paraplanners are now becoming really important to the process, and you're getting more planner firms, advisor firms employing and training up paraplanners to help them in that process of giving this financial planning advice service to clients.
And what's the impact of RDR on trail fees?
Trail commissions will be banned effectively from 2016 onwards. Now that has a dramatic effect on business models, particularly for advisor firms or financial planning firms. Depends on how they would it, and wealth managers. And what these market participants need to be starting to do now more than ever is a real focus on the business model, to get that into the space where it's a professional service firm. It's not transactionally driven, it's more relational driven. It's basically looking at, if they're segmenting their clients and looking at their niche markets, what type of relationships do they want with their clients? What type of relationships do they want with their regulators and stakeholders in the business? So it is a dynamic shift, but what we haven't seen so far is kind of the blood on the streets, if you like, that a lot of market commentators were saying that there's going to be a massive reduction in financial advisors or financial planners. And I think that's a good thing, because a lot of financial planners seem to have confidence now that they can go out to market, they can actually sit down with their clients, have a meaningful discussion, and effectively charge them fees, albeit at the moment predominantly through the product. A cliff edge will probably come, or a problem will arise when markets go south again, or the bottom falls out of the market, which will effectively mean that you've got advisors sitting on clients' couches, saying, this is what we're doing for your portfolio. The client's saying, well, hang on a minute, I've lost 15%. What exactly are you doing for me, please? And why am I paying you £5,000 a year for this advice?
So, Chris, what can firms in Asia do to prepare themselves for fee-based disclosure reforms?
Having spent 12 years of my life in Asia, and on this trip coming back to have a chat with old colleagues and learn how the market's changing over here, what I'm encouraged with is that a lot of the financial advisor, planner firms and product providers are kind of looking over their shoulder at the UK and thinking, well, one, what is this RDR thing doing? What is the effect on the market? And is there anything that we need to do? Singapore Fair is a good example of that. It started the kind of thinking process around commissions. Although commissions haven't been banned, it's effectively it's really a focus on transparency and remuneration and fairness. Because if you look at the RDR, what's it all really about? It's about fairness. It's about giving the client a fair deal. And if you give the client a fair deal, it's the heart of any human being. We all want to be treated fairly and get a fair deal. And in Hong Kong, I think commission disclosure's here. Not hard disclosure, but certainly soft disclosure. I think hard disclosure is coming through, as I understand it, next year or slightly beyond that. But I think the good thing is that we're seeing people looking at their business models, people looking at the advisors they've got in place and the planners they've got in place, making sure they've got the right skill sets. and people looking at their relationships with stakeholders to make sure that they've got the right stakeholders in place. An example of that is I was in with a firm yesterday, and they've only just done it, but they've actually got a formal board together where they're looking at professional standards and best practice in the business. And that was really encouraging to see. Even in the UK, the vast majority haven't quite got there yet with that, but they're getting there. They're getting their head around that they need professional standards. Corporate governance is very big back there. Management information, managing data flows through the business is not just important for profitability, but also regulation as well. The FCA there are basically regulating people on two things now, which is very different, which is effectively the behaviour, which is conduct risk in the business and the advisors and all people party to that, and culture. So it's very much a focus on functional culture, which is kind of top-down driven. And the people I've spoken to on both sides of the fence, wholesale and retail here, are beginning to get that too.